Senator Alice Mary Higgins. You have 8 minutes.
Thank you very much, Cathaoirleach. I might first start by just addressing that question of the horse and greyhound racing industry, and the greyhound racing industry in particular. And while we're not a party, the Civil Engagement Group have been very active in really challenging some of the practices, the funding of that industry, and indeed the animal welfare issues within that industry, some of which have been addressed in terms of rehoming, but really substantial issues in terms of overbreeding and exporting of greyhounds, which have not been addressed. However, we are here to talk about gambling and to talk also, I'm going to talk about the money around gambling. So we know that there was heated debate around the horse and greyhound racing funding last year, the increase to the greyhound sector of 2.4 million, and the fact that we look at 96 million going in this area, which literally, as a former speaker said, uses up the entire betting levy. So we need to be really clear that there's none of the betting levy that's going to anything else except for right back into those industries. But the other issues around the horse and greyhound racing have been aired. But the other issues, when we look about the financial issues around gambling, let's look to this year. And I think this is what's really important. What has happened this year? And what has happened this year is that for a lot of families, it has been devastating. There has been an increase, and we know that there's been a report of an increased rates of unemployment, of bankruptcy, and problem gambling associated with increased alcohol use, increased mental health issues. So those are concerns that are there this year for families. It's been a very hard year for a lot of people. But it has been financially a very good year for the gambling industry. Flutter, who own Paddy Power and Betfair and others, have seen an increase in their earnings. 1.4 billion is their increase, a 23% increase in their overall earnings. For the company that own Ladbrokes, we have seen an increase in 25% from their online operations of the year. And while the betting shops may be down in revenue, let's be very clear, the gambling industry has treated this year as an absolute bonanza of access online. And in that year, where those profits have been raised so hugely in 2020, we have seen the government give a €50,000 relief to bookmakers from their very, very paltry 2% betting duty. And just for context, that betting levy has gone down from 10% in 1999. So again, as Senator Gavin said, it's not like we're standing still, we've been moving backwards. A 10% levy on betting in 1999 that went down to 1% and then crept back up to 2%, but then we took a 50,000 tax relief out of that as well. So that is the financial treatment that we have had for the gambling industry in this period of time, at a time when families have been in immense crisis and when we have seen the use of online and the advertisement and the relentless promotion of online gambling increase. And when we talk about COVID and the cost of the betting industry, let's also talk about the fact of all those events that were happening for betting purposes. I know others may have, but I haven't forgotten Cheltenham last year. And I haven't forgotten the COVID spike and the coronavirus hotspots that came after Cheltenham, and the push that was there for Cheltenham to continue, and the reluctance to send strong signals against that. The fact that we've seen, again, behind closed doors races taking place in order to maintain betting and basically maintain it. And this is not about sports that are happening behind closed doors. It's around those sports that are specifically and deeply tied to the gambling industry. An addiction counsellor who we were speaking to has said, it is heartbreaking that the gambling regulator will not be in place for 2 years because COVID-19 has created the perfect storm for people with betting problems. Minister, this is, I think, a key appeal to you. Please do not let the appointment of a gambling regulator be postponed until 2023. Hear what we have been telling you, not just about gambling as a problem overall, but about this year, about the moment we are at now, where you have an industry that has made a lot of money, where you have a lot of people who are in very distressed and difficult situations, and make sure that 2022 is not more of the same, but that we are looking to make sure that we protect people, and that we are looking to make sure, when we talk about heartbreaking, that there's not hearts broken and families broken by this. And we know others have spoken about the impact. And, you know, to add to what Senator Boylan said, you know, people do lose their homes. I know people who've lost their home. People do lose their homes. People do lose their man. Those things happen. Those are not a rare exception. They happen quite frequently. But also, there are all the other losses in time and in relationship and in the essentials of life and in opportunities for other family members, and the huge impact on children. And my colleague Senator Frances Black, who works with the Rise Foundation, has spoken about the impact of gambling addiction on families and on the next generation. I want to turn to the question of advertising, and others have indicated this is a huge area, online regulation of advertising. And at the moment, that lack of regulation does mean that we're getting all hours, all locations advertising. And it's a concern. We know that we can do this. We did this on the alcohol bill. We recognised that we need to place constraints on this. So, Minister, again, this is something that needs to happen very soon. This has to happen this year, so that by 2022 we're looking at a different situation in relation to online as well as radio and TV advertising in relation to gambling. But there's another point in gambling, I think it was made very eloquently by a couple of people, which is about the relationship that we have with sport. The exception culturelle, which is something I really like, you know, from the 90s, it was that principle that there are certain kinds of sporting activity which are of such importance that they cannot be treated as commercial activities. There are certain kinds of cultural activities that are about a shared experience. And it's one of the reasons, for example, that the All-Ireland can never be sold or made pay-per-view, because it is a cultural good that everyone should be able to access. But similarly, let's turn that on its head and look at the other side. We should not accept a situation where we accept that advertising and sponsorship from gambling companies is in any ways acceptable as a price for having sport in Ireland. We should recognise that sport is something that has value, that needs investment and support, and that it's not acceptable to have it made simply a byproduct or subject to a commercial market in gambling, and it does damage the relationship that we have with sport as a collective activity. Lastly, I will finish, Minister, by saying others have spoken about loot boxes. I was going to speak on that too. The training in of gambling and gaming behaviour. I think that's something we need to address. But I would say, related to it as well, another signal that we send, let us maybe move away from the laudatory treatment of speculators, of stock market investors, of all of those who take big risks and take gambles, and some of the lionisation of that form of economic activity, as opposed to the kinds of economic activity by those who build businesses slower, steadier from the ground up. I think that's another way we can send a cultural signal to people and to children around what should be valued and what should be learnt about life. Thank you.